All right, now once we've selected a project, let's now look at the Preferences. To access the Preferences window, we'll click the Davinci Resolve window at the top, and then go down to Preferences. We can also use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control Comma to do the same thing. And here we have two sections. System, that gives us an overview of the hardware we have connected and configuration options, and User, where we can select language and other personal preferences. The System section is divided into 10 panels. Memory and GPU is where we can allocate the amount of RAM memory used by Resolve, as well as the GPU processing mode. What you choose here will depend on how much memory your system has and the video card you have installed. The Media Storage solution is where we can choose our scratch disk and see other volumes listed. The volume list at the top will be the designated scratch disk where gallery stills and cache files are stored. The checkbox for automatically displaying attached local and network storage locations allows us to see all the volumes and external drives that are connected to the computer. The Decode Options section is where we can tell Resolve to use our graphics card for decoding Blackmagic RAW, H.264, H.265, and RED footage, as well as using the Easy DCP decoder for DCP creation. You'll usually want to have all of these options checked. The Video and Audio I/O section allows us to configure what cards we have connected for playback and capture. The Video Plugins section shows us all the OpenFX plugins installed in our system, and from here we can disable or enable any of them that we like. The Audio Plugins section lets us connect Resolve to a VST plugins folder. Once this is set up, you'll be able to use your plugins on the Fairlight page for audio editing. The Control Panel section is where we can specify which specific control surface we're using if we have one. You can see a list of all control surfaces that are supported for color grading and audio. The General and Advanced sections are for setting up special configurations and SAN storage. And Internet Accounts is for signing in to some of the popular services for doing direct upload of your videos. In the User section, we have 8 panels. UI Settings is where we can set the language as well as color background, stop playback when a drop frame is detected, and several other options that depends on your personal preference. Project Save and Load is where we can configure our project backups and live save, which I recommend that you keep checked so you don't lose any of your work if Resolve crashes. The Editing panel is where we can configure the default settings for the edit page. From here, we can set the default generator, transition, and still image lengths in either seconds or frames. We can also set how much pre-roll and post-roll to use when we use the play around command, and set the default handle length. The Color panel is where we can specify different settings that pertain to the color page. For instance, we can specify how pressing the reset function on the control surface will affect the RGB balance. We can choose the default mode selected when switching from one clip to another and choose whether to use the Resolve Color Picker or the Legacy 2K version. The Ripple mode section is for choosing how grades are rippled or copied from one clip to another. Those values can be copied by exact, by percentage, or by unit. Printer light calibration is for matching the print settings when working with a film lab. The calibrations here is what you'd enter from a lab technician. The Fairlight panel lets you set video monitor offset on playback by frames and loop jog preferences. Loop jog is a brief sample preview to be heard while scrubbing the playhead through the timeline in the Fairlight page. This makes it easier to recognize bits of dialogue or music. You can set the loop jog alignment to loop audio pre, the position of the playhead, centered, or post. And the loop jog width field lets you choose how many milliseconds of audio to loop when the loop jog is enabled. In Playback Settings, you can hide the UI overlays, minimize the interface updates during playback, and optimize the playback with the Performance mode. The Control panel is where we can set the sensitivity of the control on our control surface. And if you have a Resolve Advanced or Resolve Mini control surface, you can adjust the LCD color and brightness. And finally, the Metadata panel allows us to create custom metadata presets that we can use when logging our media, and choose which metadata options we want to display. Now, once we click Save, if we've made any changes, a prompt will appear letting us know that we'll need to actually restart Resolve for those changes to take effect. All right, now moving to the Project Settings page, we'll access it by clicking this gear icon here at the bottom. The project settings page is comprised of 9 different panels that range from project and playback settings to applying LUTs and customizing the overall experience. The presets panel allows us to load and save custom project settings. This can be really useful, for instance, if we find that we're using the same project settings over and over. It's much easier to come here and save those settings as a preset for use later on down the road. The master settings panel is where we'll find most of the main settings for the project. Under timeline format, we can set the resolution, aspect ratio, and frame rate based on the kind of material that we'll be grading in our project. In the video monitoring section, we can specify how the project will be displayed based on our monitor setup, project resolution, and frame rate. We can specify our video connection, whether it's a 444 SDI or dual SDI connection for ultra high definition. Under video data levels, we can choose to monitor within the legal limits of video or monitor using the full range of data. We can specify the video bit depth to display as 8-bit or up to 12-bit. Of course, this will depend on the bit depth of our material and the grading monitor that we have connected. The monitor scaling option allows us to choose what type of filtering to use when working with scaled video. We have options for setting the optimized media resolution and format, as well as the render cache format. The working folder section is where the proxy, cache, and gallery files are stored on our system. If you needed to change this is where we would do it. The frame interpolation section is where we can specify how Resolve will handle retiming and speed changes. You can think of the options here as good, better, and best in terms of the quality, but at the expense of playback performance. Though I do have to say that having the optical flow feature in Resolve is a tremendous advantage. The image scaling panel is for determining how and when clips of different resolutions are scaled. The image scaling section is for choosing how the clips are mathematically scaled for varying results. The sharper filter is good for scaling clips up to a larger size. The smoother filter for scaling them down. The bilinear for previewing high quality material. The overwrite input and output scaling for choosing custom-made presets. The anti-alias edges for the anti-aliasing of our material. And the deinterlace quality, which determines the quality setting when using the deinterlace feature. The input scaling preset section is for specifying how Resolve will treat the footage of various sizes and aspect ratios to match with the settings in our timeline. By default, Resolve will scale the entire image to fit, but there are these other options at your disposal. If you ever have difficulty getting clips to display correctly, then this is the section where we can address that. The output scaling preset section allows us to choose a different resolution to output to our grading monitor as well as for final delivery. To choose a different resolution, we'll need to uncheck the Match Timeline Settings checkbox. Then we can specify any resolution to our liking. We also have these other options for addressing mismatched resolutions. In the Color Management panel, we can set the color science and color space for our project. We'll explore this subject in depth in the Color Management tutorial. In the Lookup Table section, we can apply LUTs to our footage or monitor using a particular LUT. If you don't know what a LUT is, that's perfectly okay. LUT stands for Lookup Table, and we'll be going over them in later tutorials. We can also create a broadcast save filter and edit the soft clipping of LUTs or save a LUT from our current grade. In the General Options panel, we have the Conform Options sections to help us when round-tripping from other applications. Color, where we can specify whether to use local or remote grade versions. An option to automatically match clips in the media pool with the master timeline. An option to save thumbnails with the project instead of the default directory. And other settings for using legacy ranges and values. The Dynamics Profile section allows us to adjust the transition from one dynamic keyframe to the next. In other words, changing the values here will determine the ramp or the acceleration to which the keyframe is executed. The Versions section is a place where we can add auto-naming to the different grade versions. We can either add custom names, or we can choose from any of the convenient drop-down names. The Camera Raw panel is where we can set the project default settings for whatever RAW camera we're working with. We can choose from the ARRI Alexa, Blackmagic RAW, Canon RAW, Cinema DNG, Panasonic VariCam RAW, Phantom Cine, Red, and Sony RAW. Once we've selected the camera, we want to configure the decode quality. That's basically the resolution we want the footage to be decoded to. Then we can choose to decode using the default settings, the camera metadata, or as project, where we can then make global adjustments for the entire project. But there's more on that in later tutorials. The Capture and Playback panel is for configuring a videotape recorder that's connected to the system. The settings will vary here depending upon the source material and the type of connection that the deck is using. The Subtitles panel is where we can set a character per line limit, minimum caption duration, and maximum characters per second. Finally, the Fairlight panel is where we can set the sample rate for the whole project, audio metering settings, and enable Fairlight to work on different immersive audio standards like RO3D, Dolby Atmos, SMPTE ST2098, and so on. And that's it. I hope this video has given a solid understanding of all the options that there are. I just want this to be a basic overview of all the settings and where they are in here. And when we need to change any of these for any particular importance, we'll cover that in a later tutorial. Thanks for watching.